Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, leading publishers of books, directories, educational guides and magazines aimed at schools in the UK and beyond. Enjoy the podcast. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Teachers Talk Radio with The Late Show with me, Tom Rogers. And tonight we are talking all things teacher apprenticeships. I thought we'd do this topic because it's been a really interesting one in the last few weeks to see the reaction to teacher apprenticeships. So some have reacted very negatively to this idea. Others have reacted, well, very positively, actually. I'll talk about my sort of take on that imminently, but just to give you a little bit of background before we do anything, you're listening to Teachers Talk Radio. This is the largest audio platform for educators in the UK and beyond. We've got more than 50 hosts on Teachers Talk Radio who are talking to you about teaching on a daily basis. We've got shows every single day, multiple shows every week, and you can enjoy them all by going to ttradio.org. And you can click on listen back, and you can listen back to any show. You can search for any show. You can find topics or issues that you find interesting on there to discuss. So we ultimately we set up this platform to engage with the profession, to talk about the key issues affecting teachers. And this idea of apprenticeships is certainly one of those. It's a big issue that could, well, I suppose it could revolutionize the way in which teachers enter the teaching profession. We'll have to wait and see on that, obviously, the way in which it's introduced and so on. But certainly it's something that is going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. Now, Gillian Keegan, who is the new Education Secretary, has talked extensively about this idea. She actually appeared on LBC radio, I think it was, the end of last year, talking about the idea of apprenticeships in general being a way for teachers or people to not get into debt. So building big debts through university. She's very much pro apprenticeships in general, and one of the routes that she wants to introduce for apprentices is to get into the classroom. This means, for anybody who maybe is outside of the UK or outside of our system, this would mean getting people into the classroom who don't have a degree. So this is not a postgraduate route into teaching. This is a route into teaching without requiring a degree certificate. So this is a way that she thinks, and the government might think, will help people to get into the profession easier. Perhaps there are teachers out there who are put off from going into the profession because they don't have a degree or the skills that they've developed on through the academic route. So this would be a way of attracting those people into the profession. The critics of this idea, of course, have said that this could mean the sort of dumbing down, if you like, of the teaching profession. That's one of the criticisms that we've seen, is this idea that it sort of deprofessionalizes teaching. I personally disagree with that. I'm quite in favor of this idea if it's done in the right way. I can see the benefits of it, but equally there's a lot of questions that I would have about it. Personally, I think with the way in which degrees and higher education has gone, particularly in the last few years, I personally, I don't know if, and this is just my personal view, I don't know if a degree is as valuable in terms of the learning experience as it was. I mean, if you think about online degrees now, you think about online learning, you think about all the different avenues that people can gain knowledge in. So is it therefore necessary to prevent people from entering the profession through an apprenticeship route or through an alternative route to having to gain a degree? It's an interesting one, certainly. So tonight I've got multiple guests and panelists who are going to be talking about their experience, their views, their knowledge on apprenticeships, and what they think. And if you want to join them at any point, then you can click the little icon in the bottom left-hand side that says that's a little microphone icon. You can click that at any point to potentially join this conversation. So I thought I'd start maybe just by mentioning the sponsor for today's show, which is John Catt Educational. If you want to find out more about the books and educational resources that John Catt have available to you, you can visit johncattbookshop.com, and you can hopefully take advantage of some of the products and books and services that John Catt have to offer. We're very proud to partner with John Catt. They've had many recent releases which have gained huge popularity within the profession. Check those out on the homepage, get involved. And yeah, that's johncattbookshop.com. Just to introduce my first guest, I've got several guests who've very kindly already zoomed into this conversation, but I know that Mrs. B is on a very tight schedule. Mrs. B is a mum, a wife, an OU Open University graduate, trainee teacher, year 5 therapeutic teacher, who has been teaching, I think, for 13 years. So, Mrs. B, if you want to click unmute in the bottom left-hand side, there we are. Good evening.
Hello, good evening.
Hello, you sound really tentative, like, hello, I don't know where I am, what am I doing
I've never done
here?
anything like this before, so it's all very new, but exciting.
Don't panic. Don't panic. Nothing bad's going to happen. So can you tell us a little bit about you before we sort of, I mean, I don't know whether that introduction from me is correct. So do you want to tell us a bit about you and what you're currently doing?
Yes, I'm a trainee teacher through the apprenticeship route. I started as a level 1 TA back in 2006, worked my way up and did my level 2, my level 3, and then I became a HLTA in 2010.
Okay.
Then my plan was to get a degree because I couldn't go any further without the degree. My apprenticeship route, you have to have a degree. So I, in 2012, through the Open University, carried on working and gained my degree. It took me 5 years, and I got a 2-1 in 2017. But then, unfortunately, the GTP route at the time that it finished, and that was my route into teaching. So I had to put it on hold. But then, luckily, through a very supportive head teacher, she put me forward for the apprenticeship teacher training route, and here we are today.
Do you want to tell me, because I want to start really going back to like this idea of sort of when you were a TA and you got your different levels and so on and got that experience. I mean, do you think you really needed to do the degree? Or
No.
do you think that was just a case of I need to do the degree to teach?
Yeah, I just had to tick the box. I had 2 very young children at the time, so I was still working full time, doing work at night. It was hard work, but it had to be done for me to progress further.
And what was the degree in?
So it was an open degree, so you could choose the modules, whatever modules you wanted. I chose all education-based modules. But at the end of the day, I didn't really need it for what I've actually for the apprenticeship route and what I'm doing on the job training.
Yeah, I was going to say, because that's the interesting one, isn't it? Is, I mean, what sort of the transition from TA to teacher? Um, have you? I mean, what would you say about that? Have you noticed anything? What's been the most challenging parts of that process, or is there anything you've noticed? I mean, has it been a smooth transition?
I've noticed that teachers do a hell of a lot.
Yeah,
Because as a TA, I was teaching, I was doing the computing curriculum,
yeah,
but it was nothing compared to the workload now that I've noticed for teachers.
yeah. I mean, because I've sort of done, I guess, a little bit of TAing. Particularly very early in my career, not in a formal sense. Like I've never been employed as a TA, but I've certainly acted as a
Yeah,
TA. Now, I think the biggest, I guess, difference for me in that is the book doesn't necessarily stop with you. So
no,
that was the one bit that was sort of, I don't know if nice is the right word, but I felt like, oh, this is quite nice because if something's going wrong or if there's an issue, I'm sort of the second person to deal
yeah,
with it.
you're not responsible. That's the ultimate thing with
Yeah,
it.
that's the
You
biggest thing.
can step back.
Yeah, in most classrooms, because I'm sure there's some TAs who probably aren't able to do that in particular classrooms or situations, of course, but in general, that I guess that would be the biggest difference. What I mean, in terms of this whole thing of teacher apprenticeships and the idea of teachers being able to get in the profession, because I know the reason I've invited you on is you commented on a Twitter post last week about teacher apprenticeships. I was wondering, could you explain in detail your views on this, your sort of opinions on the idea of teacher apprenticeships?
Well, for me, I couldn't give up work for a year. I've got a mortgage, I've got two young children, well, not young now, but two children, and I just couldn't do it financially. I couldn't afford to give up work for a year to get qualified. So without this route, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be able to do it ever. So for me,
Yeah,
for helping people, and I understand people without a degree just coming into the job. I think it should be more for people who've worked like myself, been a TA for many years, or have some experience in a classroom.
because ultimately, from what you've said, it probably took you another 5 or 6 years from what it could have. Maybe it would have taken you one through an apprenticeship route, but actually it's taken you 5 or 6 to get into the classroom as a teacher.
Yeah, it's taken me six, and then obviously without the funding at the point, it's taken me even longer. It took me 10 years to get
Yeah,
when I
because you've
so when I
you've
first 2012, I first started my degree.
yeah, so you've like funded that Open University degree yourself.
Yeah,
And then obviously you've done that outside of your time working as a TA,
HLTA. Yeah,
that's the one. So you've sort of done that. I mean, how, again, that's a massive challenge, isn't it? Like, how have you,
it was
like,
hard
I know you
work.
said you've got a family and stuff. So how was that routine when you were doing that?
It was tough, but I've got a supportive husband and family, so they were behind me all the way. And yeah, I just did it. And then I thought, hang on a minute, if I'm working, then doing work at night, surely I can become a teacher then.
Yeah. I mean, what would you say to those people who would say, and there are many around, and you know, I can completely see this point of view, is the what happens if, I mean, do you feel because you haven't done a, what was your degree in again? The OU
So
one.
it was classed as an open degree, so you could choose whatever subjects you wanted.
Right. So what did you do? What
So I did
subjects?
maths, I did an inclusion one, research on child development. There was different options. It was that long ago, I can't remember them all
Yeah.
to be honest.
Yeah. No, no, that's fine. Because I
Curriculum,
mean,
there's one on curriculum as well.
and you're currently teaching year 6, right?
At year five.
Year 5. So do you feel that that degree helped you with subject knowledge for what you're doing now, or do you think it's minimal?
It wasn't much. I'm learning a lot more on the job now,
Yeah. Because I mean,
a lot
one of the
more.
things for me is like being honest, my degree, I can't honestly say that my degree helped me when it came to subject knowledge in teaching. Like
No,
maybe there's the odd tiny little thing. And I did a straight history degree, right? But I
right.
honestly can't say that my degree really helped me with my subject knowledge in
To
on
deliver to the children, yeah.
yeah, on any significant
Yeah,
level. What helped me was once I started, and then I was repeat teaching something. So by the time I got to like year, you know, I don't know, like 5, 6, 7, 8 into the profession, that's when I started to be like, oh, you know what? I've developed a sort of better knowledge from researching and planning those lessons.
yeah.
That's where I sort of developed a lot of my subject knowledge, and then potentially getting interested in the things I was teaching, and then building that knowledge on the back of that.
Yeah, well, it's
And
like me now. I'm having to research science topics that I'm not familiar with, and I'm sure that would happen again when I've qualified because I'll be teaching maybe a different year group, and so it'll all change again. I think you just constantly until you, like you say, that you've been doing it a while and you know what you're doing, you know what you're teaching.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? That you know, I was going to say just a few minutes ago that there's those who would say that not having that academic background or that academic process will either disadvantage you or will leave you a little bit vulnerable in the classroom, like not knowing your stuff, basically. You know.
Yeah, I think any ECT who goes into a classroom, you'll still not know absolutely everything, will you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I just think this whole push on subject knowledge, it's really interesting because I just don't think the other real element you've got to look at as well with this is when you're like 18, 19, 20, you know, you're starting out at uni, I'm not sure it's easy to develop the sort of subject knowledge that you need to be a high school teacher. I don't know about primary, but certainly as because I didn't teach primary, but as a high school teacher, secondary level, I think it's hard to really know and develop unless you're an expert on the national curriculum at the age of 18 or 19. You know, I think it's hard to sort of do that. But it's going to be interesting to talk to other guests later on about that. Mrs. B, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for
Oh,
giving up a
thank you.
little bit of your time to come on and talk about it and share your sort of experience, which I think is really interesting.
No
So thank
problem.
you for that.
Thank you for inviting me.
Brilliant. Cheers. That
Thanks,
was
Tom.
Mrs. B. I'm now going to bring in Dr. Sarah Hewitt. Good evening, Dr. Sarah.
Good evening.
Hello. How are you today?
Hi. I'm very well, thank you.
Excellent. Can you, again, can you give us a little bit of background, a brief background on you, what you do, and your story so far in education?
Okay, so I am currently what's called a teaching fellow at the University of Southampton, and I teach computer science related stuff. Prior to that, I was a secondary school teacher for 11 years, and I taught English and media.
Yeah.
I did my degree with the Open University, and I did English, literature and art history, and then did my PGCE at the University of Exeter. And yeah, so I guess one of the reasons that you've asked me on this evening is because I was very clear that I think it's really important that teachers have a degree.
Yeah, I was really interested by this sort of point because I don't know if I agree. Like I sort of I don't know. I want to hear your sort of methodology on this first. I want to hear why. I want to hear the why.
Okay. Well, so I accept. So you said just now that you weren't sure whether the subject knowledge necessarily helps you when you get into the classroom. So when I think about what I did with my degree, with the English literature stuff that I studied, the texts that I was looking at weren't helpful in themselves, but it's about a way of thinking. It's about the confidence, knowing that you've got a degree and a way of thinking about your subject, and you pick up everything else as you teach.
Yeah, that's so. I mean, but what is it? Because the thing is, right? I mean, what would you say if I said, right? Let's say history, right? You know, I did a history
Yep.
degree. I right now this was. I mean, I did my degree 2003 to 2006, so it was a different world then. Granted, but if I did that same degree now, I'd be sitting there going, I can do this whole thing on YouTube. But I know that sounds ridiculous. I could do this whole thing on YouTube, or to mix it
Yep.
up a bit, I could connect with people on Twitter. I could connect with people on other learning platforms. And that's where I would get, if you like, the sort of more seminar experience, even comments on YouTube.
Yeah, but it depends on who. It depends on who you're teaching, though. So that model of online learning is likely to be more successful when you're teaching at higher education level, because in theory you've got students that have signed up for the thing that you want to teach, and they're more motivated and they're going to engage. Whereas when you're teaching in a secondary school, it's not like that. And there's a difference between knowing your subject, so having the subject knowledge or having the confidence in your subject knowledge, and the actual skills of being a teacher, and they're very different. And you can have all the subject knowledge in the world and struggle to be an effective teacher. You can be an effective teacher and build your subject knowledge as you go along. So build on the foundations that you've come in with. but they're different. They're completely different. I think they're very different skills.
On that latter one, why does that building of subject knowledge need to involve a degree?
I think it's about professionalism.
Yeah.
We are professionals. However much we may feel undermined, and I do. So this idea of apprenticeships for teachers is not a new one, and it's been mooted. It's been suggested before that there should be an easier way into teaching, and my objection is always the same. It takes away the professionalism. If we don't have that professional qualification and that level of subject knowledge already, we're at risk of losing our professional status. And I think that's really important. We're role models for young people. We have done things that we would, in an ideal world, like a lot of them to do. And the fact that we're standing in front of them having done those things, I think, is really important.
But it depends. But done those things, I guess. It depends what you view a degree as, right? So for me,
yep.
a degree in its most practical, simple form is you go to lectures, you go to seminars. This is just the actual qualification. It's nothing about the social side.
Yep.
It's nothing about, you go to seminars, you go to lectures, you sit the tests, you submit the assignments,
yep.
and at the end you get a certificate. That's what it is.
Yep.
So, barring the certificate, and even now some online course providers would provide that. So, for example, Udemy or all these other ones out there provide a certificate at the end. Now, I'm not saying that certificate in today's world would hold the same credence as a degree, right? I'm not suggesting that.
Yep, it doesn't.
Of course,
it certainly doesn't.
But in terms of the knowledge and in terms of the quality of the delivery of that content, you can go to Harvard online. You can do free courses with Harvard. So if the quality of that would be comparable, if not better, to lectures or seminars or whatever in other universities, and that can be done in a much quicker time frame, potentially for free. So if we imagine like Mrs. B there, who's saying that, you know, people with families, with maybe financial commitments, you know, that they can't quit to do a degree, and Open University costs a lot of money to be able to do that, and also a huge time commitment. Whereas what Mrs. B was saying, and Mrs. B, if you're still there, you can actually come in on this if you want, but what Mrs. B was saying was she didn't feel doing that degree actually helped her or enabled her as a teacher in the end. It was she described it as box ticking. Mrs. B, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, sorry, just put me on the pod. I agree with what Dr. Sarah is saying.
Yeah.
The high school teaching, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
For primary school teaching, I think you've got that much subject knowledge for each one. You can't possibly cover it with a degree. So
yeah, I would definitely agree. I know very little about primary school teaching, but what I do know is that you teach everything, and it's different. It's a very different place to be teaching. Nevertheless, though, in many ways, I think primary school teachers are more important, and it's even more important that they retain that professional status.
Yeah.
And going to university and doing a degree is one of the ways in which we get that.
Yeah.
Go on. Sorry, Miss Speak.
No, I do agree with what you're saying, and it's a professional job, isn't it? But there is just there's probably so many amazing teaching assistants who can become teachers and have got teachers around them who I think, yeah, like they did with me, put forward, do it. But if they can't afford to give up work, they can't do it. So
yeah, no, I do agree with that, and I think there's a bigger question about how people who are mature learners are able to access learning that's affordable. It was when I did my degree, because I did mine with the Open University when I was 30, and I'm 59 now. And it was affordable, and it should still be affordable, for
me.
mature learners.
Yeah, when I did it, I did get some funding for it, But now, if I wouldn't be able to afford to do it now.
Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, leading publishers of books, directories, educational guides and magazines aimed at schools in the UK and beyond. Enjoy the podcast.
Yeah, so here's the problem. Here's part of the problem. It's access to a degree for people that want that professional qualification. Although, I mean, obviously, I'm talking about professional qualification, and of course, that's the PGCE that you do in that year afterwards. So you do your degree, and then you do your PGCE, and that's the professional qualification. But I still think you need the degree first. It gives you a level of subject knowledge, a level of maturity, the ability to reflect on how you learn and how the process works. And then that PGCE is the start of the practical skills you need in order to be an effective teacher.
But let's say, though, Sarah, that I've worked in big business for 20 years, right? And I'm now 45 years old. I now want to become a business studies teacher, and I'm an entrepreneur who has run a very successful business for 20 years, and I want to switch out of that and become a business skills teacher. Are we saying that I don't have the professional status to do that without doing a degree in business?
That's a really good question. I don't, and honestly, I can't. It's very hard for me to answer. I would want you to have done a degree at some point before you became that successful business entrepreneur, even if your degree wasn't necessarily in business, so that you had that qualification that allowed you to do the PGCE and then come and join me on an equal footing. I'd still want you to have done that.
But I suppose if I was that person, then I could make a very, very strong argument that I've gained the skills and experience and knowledge over those 20 years that anything I was to do in a degree would be second rate to that. Would I can't. But sorry, go on.
So you've delivered that knowledge in a completely different forum. You have had to perform very differently. So had you done, and I've not done a business studies degree, so I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming that if you do a degree in business studies, you're looking at various theories, you're looking at it from an intellectual point of view. Whereas if you may be a very successful business entrepreneur, but that doesn't mean you have all the knowledge necessary to pass on to a group of GCSE students. And that's the point of doing the degree. It gives you that foundation knowledge that you can then use to build on. It's being successful at something. It's like saying, well, I'm a playwright, therefore I can teach English. And we know that isn't true.
I guess it comes back to your statement earlier about, which I agree with, which is saying that a degree gives you that professional status. However, my argument is that that's probably going to change because 20, 30 years ago, perhaps, but I think that we're starting to see more value, rightly, and more professional status in practical experience and knowledge through experience, maybe, and maybe the value of somebody doing whatever I've just described 20 years as a business leader or entrepreneur would hold.
But that's privileging skills over knowledge, and I think that's my fundamental problem. It's privileging being able to do over being able to be over knowing.
But surely in the area of business, or say for example, I'm trying to think of, okay, let's say for example, I'd been a professional footballer, okay, and I'd gone into football at the age of 16. I'd worked with all the best coaches in the game. I'd learned so much from them in terms of how and then I've done my UEFA coaching badges, right? And then I've become a coach. and then I've become a coach, and then I've become a football manager, and then whatever. And I've been a hands-on coach as well as a professional player. I've done that. And then at the age of 50, I've thought, you know what, I fancy a change. I'm going to become a teacher. And then somebody says, you know what, Tom, you've been a professional footballer. You've been a coach and a manager at a professional level over a period of 30 years. But we don't, unless you do a 3 or 4 year BA degree in sports science, we don't feel you can be a PE teacher as in comparison to somebody who is 21 years old, who has been getting drunk every week and done a degree in sports science. I just don't think it's like, I don't know. There's something about that. I can't get my head around it.
So maybe the answer there is a conversion, something like a conversion degree where you don't necessarily go back and you do 3 years as an undergrad, or 6 years at the Open University, which is, I mean, it generally takes twice as long to study part-time. Maybe you do the equivalent of a 1-year degree, and so a bit like a master's, but not. But I would still want you to go back and have that theoretical knowledge and have that qualification that you're bringing into an educational establishment. So it's not just about, your practical knowledge. It's also about all of the other things.
Yeah. I mean, like I say, that's still, though, for me, like at that point, I'm going, what am I going to learn at that point as that 50-year-old who, let's say, for example, I'm trying to think of like, I don't know, David Beckham decided he wanted to become a PE teacher, right? And he's already, let's imagine he's already done all his coaching qualifications. Maybe Jose Mourinho is a better example because he was a player, then he was a very successful coach and manager. And we said to him, oh, do you know what, Jose? Like, we need you to spend, obviously it wouldn't matter to him what he spent, but let's say it's the average person. You're going to have to spend 20 grand on this 1-year degree, in inverted commas. You're going to have, 5 hours lectures a week. You're going to have a seminar a week, and you're going to be learning from people with much less experience and less knowledge than you. And then you can become a teacher of children.
Okay, so they may have less knowledge and less experience, but that doesn't mean that there aren't things to learn. Yeah. There are always things to learn, right? And so I'm still going to say that I would like them to do, even if it's a 1-year kind of conversion course, so that they come out with the equivalent of a BEd, and then they're on a par with every other teacher. In terms of the cost, so there I think there is an issue. We do have a teacher recruitment and retention crisis. And one of the ways of addressing that might be to encourage people who have got plenty of experience in the real world, which is really important when you're a teacher. I mean, I didn't start teaching until I was in my mid-30s. And that life experience was invaluable. It made a huge difference.
But maybe
so give them the opportunity Sarah, to do yeah. Go
I was
on,
going to
sorry.
ask, just within that, I was going to ask you, at what point did you do your degree? Your OU degree, I mean.
I was 30 when I started that, 36 when I finished.
But do you think that therefore, because if I did a degree now, I guarantee I would get more out of it and be more successful in it and gain way more from it than when I did it at 18. So do you think
I'd have been hopeless at 18.
Do you think your experience, so if you'd have done that, and if you'd have done your degree 18 to 21 or 19 to 22 or whatever, do you think you'd have the same view on the value of a degree? Because you probably got loads more out of it because of the stage with which you did it at.
Yes. Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point, and probably not.
And maybe that's colouring colouring my view. But then most people do it at that time.
Yeah. Well, and I think also it's fair to say that a lot of people will, I don't know what the figures are here, but will go to university 18 or 19. They'll do their 3 years. They'll then do that conversion at the end. So they get their teaching qualification and then never actually take up the position of teacher for all sorts of reasons. Pay and conditions, I'm sure, are a major factor. because they look at what the job entails and they say, no, thanks. Oh, no, that's not what we're talking about here. But what is relevant is the cost of doing a degree. And just to go back to what you were saying about, you've been you're in your 50s, you've been very successful, you would like a change of career and you want to go into teaching. So offer people a 1 year, very much shorter degree, but they come out with the same qualification and at a reduced cost. I don't see that sounds to me like a, in fact, didn't Teach First used to do something like this, where they wanted people, part of their marketing campaign was about attracting people that had been successful in other fields to come into teaching.
Well, probably. I mean, we've got all the different ones, haven't we? We've had the military
yeah.
scheme. We've had all these different schemes. But I think I just want to, before we go on, Sarah, I just want to read some of the comments from people. And if you're listening to this as a podcast and you're confused what's going on, people are tweeting in as we're live right now. So don't worry. You just sit back, sip your tea, keep enjoying it. But I'm going to read these comments out. So Edward has tweeted in all the way from Canada. And he said, I did a plumbing apprenticeship and I'm a professional. I'm now a college professor and still a professional. A degree doesn't give you any knowledge to teach. I mean, Sarah, what would you say to Edward when he said?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. A degree doesn't teach you how to teach. A degree gives you subject knowledge, confidence, all of those things. What teaches you to teach is that PGCE that you do, that year teacher training, and then afterwards, actually, you learn on the job. And it takes several years before you might feel confident as a teacher. But there is a difference between why a degree is necessary and then how you learn to be a teacher.
I agree with that. I agree with that. I think my issue is in the value being placed on the degree, because I just think there is such a variable, A, quality of degrees, and B, the stage or the input with which the student gives that degree dictates how valuable that is. I also, and I mentioned this earlier, and this may just be my personal experience, but I'd love to hear from other teachers actually on this. But those who did a subject-specific degree, whether it be at the age of 18 or later, how useful was that for actually teaching? For me, minimal. Because a lot of number one, a lot of the units I did were sort of irrelevant to what I had to teach in the national curriculum. Secondly, I missed a lot of lectures because I was out till 4 a.m. in the morning. So those lectures went down the drain anyway. And three, there was no... because of how it's not like school where, like when I was there, I had like, I don't know, 13 hours a week or something of contact time. Like I didn't feel, this is my personal speaking now, by the way, but I didn't feel that I got as much out of it as I would have liked. And I don't, and in terms of subject knowledge, my biggest subject knowledge gains were on the job, it didn't help me with regards to subject knowledge, but I'm sure that's because I just wasted my degree, like watching like whatever was on at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Monday, at that point, like Loose Women. I don't know what I was watching with my mate, but probably something hideous like that, But anyway, Sarah, I'm going to stay there, Sarah, if you want. You're totally welcome to stay for the rest of the show. I'm going to bring in some other panelists. It would be good to have you because you've got some really good, strong views on this. So if you want to stick around, please do. But I'm going to bring in... Oh, by the way, I'm going to bring Vicky. Vicky, I don't know if you're a teacher. So Vicky's requesting in. Vicky, if you just like... Let us know. Are you in education? Are you? Because sometimes we get like Russian bot accounts on Teachers Talk Radio because they love to talk. So just let us know that you're real, that you are, just a real person. You don't even have to be a teacher, just a real person. Give us a signal, give us a tweet or something, reply. But just before I bring Vicky in, I want to bring in Partridge Maths, and it's hilarious that I only know Partridge Maths as Partridge Maths. I don't even know his first name. Partridge, are you there in a pear tree?
Hi, Tom. Yeah, I'm here.
Excellent. Can you tell us your first name?
It's Wayne.
Wayne. Right. Now, Wayne, tell us your view. Well, first of all, before I ask you your views on teacher apprenticeships, tell us a little bit about where you're at in your career and so on.
So I'm head of maths at a school in Gloucester. I've been teaching for I think it's my 10th or 11th year. I've been a head of maths for 6 of those. And before that, I worked in sort of industry. I worked like abroad in sort of financial services, and then I sort of came back into the PGC and then came to teaching sort of that way.
Brilliant. Okay, tell me your views on teacher apprenticeships.
Well, I think are we asking like the right question?
Probably
Because the sort of the tweet that I put out the other day was like, if I've got a bucket where like a third of the water's coming out of it, then I don't really need to be thinking about more different ways to put the water in. Like, is that the thing that's causing everything to leak out the bottom? And I'm not sure that that is. Like, it could be, but I just don't. But for me, it's the fact that you've got what 30% of teachers leaving within. Is it 30% teachers leave within 5 years? Is that the statistic?
something like that. I mean, it's dreadful. They actually released the NFER today, released a set of sort of stats, or at least they analysed the stats. I'm not sure when they actually came out, but basically, like, teacher recruitment has absolutely stagnated this year as last year. In fact, I think it's even got worse in primary level, like getting people into the profession.
Yeah. And but to be honest with you, like that's not the bit that I'm talking about. The bit I'm talking about is like the people leaving. So it's not even the people that you're training. It's the fact that there are thousands of people across the country who have been qualified teachers at some point in their lives, but they decided that that's not for them. And for me, that's the bigger problem, as opposed to which route of sort of training you go down. Because you've got Teach First, you've got PGCEs, you've got people that do a bachelor's in sort of like education, like to sort of prepare them that way. You've got all these different routes, and it's good that we've got that kind of variety. But actually, like, is that a barrier? Having a degree, is that a barrier to people who want to be teachers?
Well,
like, I don't know.
Yeah, I genuinely think it could be for a number. Potentially, because you have to remember how much it costs these days to do a degree, how much time it takes, and the commitment. And obviously, if you're older, you've got family, whatever, it's being able to have the time to do it. So I think it could be a barrier to. I don't know how many people, and obviously you're absolutely right, Wayne. In terms of, it is Wayne, isn't it?
Yeah,
I thought I just made that up. That's good. But like people who. It's not going to help with retention. You're absolutely right. Massive issue retention. Like, we know that. But if we're just talking about people with barriers to get in, there could be quite a few who would like to do that, but they just don't have the means to do a degree. They just don't have the commitment, the time commitment to do it.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying about sort of career changes, and I think there's definitely a part of it sort of within that. But I do think that the main thing is like, let's look at trying to sort out retention first, and then, well, is it the case that as people said, well, when I do a degree, I don't feel prepared to be a teacher. So is the reason why retention is so poor is because people don't feel prepared when they're within the profession, or is it something else?
Let me ask you a question. How useful was your degree when you started teaching?
It's quite my degree is quite unique. I did a degree in maths and English because I sort of couldn't decide which one I liked the most. So the teaching English side of my degree has no relevance to me. Well, no, yeah, little relevance to me. Sort of being a teacher of maths, being a head of maths. What I suppose what it does is it does allow you to kind of see those connections that happen further down the line. So I wouldn't say it was completely useless. It definitely doesn't prepare you for the kind of performance aspect of it. But what it does is it gives you that sort of that body of knowledge that you can draw upon later on down the line. Sort of, if I'm talking about like teaching a bit of computing, I can be like, oh, okay, like at university I did this thing called MATLAB, and like this is how this is all kind of related further on down the line. Whereas obviously if I hadn't have done that, then I wouldn't be able to talk about those kind of experiences and about kind of like where it leads. So it's not, like I said, for the actual performance aspect of it, for like going and standing in front of a class of teenagers.
No, but I mean, I'm talking like
being a teacher.
Even. I'm talking like subject knowledge. I mean, do you think that your degree? I mean, the thing is, for me, and for maths particularly, maybe I don't know, but like, was your GCSEs and A levels not more useful in your degree, subject knowledge wise? Would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
This is my point. So this is my point. If that, like, imagine you'd have done a apprenticeship style route to teaching, right? I'm not saying you would have wanted to do that, by the way, at 18 or 19. I'm not suggesting you'd want to stand in. You could or want to stand in front of a class at the age of 20, right? I would have struggled because I'd have looked younger than half the kids in the school, right? But like, my point is this: is that if someone had said to you, right, you've got that knowledge at the age of 18 from your GCSEs and A levels, you can now do an apprenticeship route, which takes a year and mixes, it's very much on the job, but they would also provide you with, I don't know, online courses or other things for you to boost your subject knowledge over that year, maybe an access to a tutor, stuff like that. Would that have been, well, certainly it would have been more cost effective, wouldn't it, than doing a degree?
Yeah, and I guess, like, to be honest, like, I'm not somebody that worries. Like, when I was sort of doing my PGCE, I didn't think, oh, like, that's £9,000 of my student loan that I need to sort of get to be able to sort of do this. Like, I didn't really think of that as a consideration, because I was just like, well, that's what I want to do. That's the cost of it. If I don't want to do that, I'll do something else. Like, but that's sort of, I think that probably leads to a wider question about sort of higher education in itself, and how effective that is sort of as a cost thing. It's not. I don't know, when we talk about education as a system, as an institution, like, I don't believe that it should be, if we're thinking about cost effectiveness of it, we should be wanting to educate ourselves to better society and better ourselves. But now we see it as a business. It's like, all right, okay, well, I'm paying £9,000 a year, so I'm expecting this, and this. And has that led to an improvement in it? And I don't think it has. So I've kind of gone off on a tangent there, but it's just sort of.
I mean, I guess what I'm asking it, because Sarah was on earlier and she did very articulately. I disagree with her points, but she put it across very articulately, which is that she was saying, like, having a degree, in inverted commas, gives that professional status. Now, my counter argument to that was, why are we so wrapped up in the idea of a degree offering that professional status? Why do experiences and sort of knowledge gained outside of a degree, a conventional degree, not provide that? Why can we not make those things provide that professional status? Is that on us? Why do degrees hold that?
Yeah, and I suppose the questions that would be, like, what do the most successful sort of companies? What do the most successful companies do? Like, the ones the ones that are not in education, do they probably do value that academia, and, like, you do have those really kind of competitive graduate schemes that you've got to get onto, but then there is also that room for those people that have had alternate experiences as well. And I think that, like, having those alternate experiences is okay, but at the same time, I still feel like we're kind of asking the wrong question. Like I said, like, are we trying to find more ways to fill the bucket, or are we trying to stop the leak at the bottom?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Wayne, stay where you are, because I'm going to ask Ashley to come in now. So Ashley, I don't know if you're there, but if you are, just unmute yourself. There we go.
Yeah, I'm here.
Good evening. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Right. Now, Ashley, can you tell me a little bit about you and what led you onto this show here?
So I trained in Australia. I completed my qualifications back in 2010, and it was a slightly different system there. So I did what they called a double degree. So I did 4 years at uni, and I did a Bachelor of Teaching and a Bachelor of Arts at the same time. So slightly more intensive study, but it meant that I started my first teaching placements in my very first term at uni. So I was one of those 18-year-olds walking into a classroom as a teacher. on a placement. So that's kind of given me a slightly different perspective on where the subject knowledge fits in. I've been working in the UK since 2012, and I've been doing quite a lot of mentoring in the last few years. Currently mentoring one teacher apprentice, and Vicky, who is on the programme, is she's just completed her teaching apprenticeship and has just taken over class responsibility.
Fantastic. Let's check we've got Vicky here. Vicky, if you want to unmute yourself, we can just check that you're there. It's on the bottom. There we go.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening.
Brilliant. Ashley, sorry, carry on. We'll go back to Vicky in a minute. I was wondering sort of what your views are, first of all, on teacher apprenticeships.
Well, having my own personal experience, my Bachelor of Arts was photography and contemporary dance. So I originally trained as a secondary teacher, and in secondary I taught everything from visual arts to computing to basically any subject that they wanted to throw me in for. And I transitioned to teaching primary in 2015. I now teach year 6, and I have taught right down to Key Stage 1, and I can wholeheartedly say that my degree helps me when we teach dance in PE. And that's it.
And that's it.
That's it. You know, there is like very, very little of my degree that is useful to me now. So I don't place the same value on that degree other than as a learning how to learn pathway.
When you say learning how to learn pathway, can you sort of expand on that?
So I think for me, my degree was valuable in that it taught me how to be a learner at a higher level. It learned me how to study, and it taught me how to study independently. I learned how to manage my time and do those kinds of things through my degree. But in terms of subject knowledge, there's very little relevance.
That's so interesting. I mean, that's sort of my view. I think Wayne sort of agreed. Wayne, I don't want to speak for you, but Wayne sort of agreed in that, I think, by saying that he sort of got more in 16 to 18 sort of age than he did post 18 subject knowledge. So it's interesting. I think if you asked, I'll have to run a poll or something on this, but I think if you asked, the vast majority of teachers would say that they did the subject knowledge that they gained through their degrees didn't significantly help them in the classroom. I don't know that for a fact, though. Maybe I'll be completely wrong on that.
I would say, having spent the last year mentoring Vicky, and obviously the way the apprenticeship program works at the moment is that you do still have to have a degree. But having known her for a few years, she did work in our school prior to taking on the apprenticeship. Having known her for a few years, I don't actually think that degree has done anything more than tick a box for her. She didn't need to do that.
Let me ask you about the pro, because I know Vicky's there as well, so she can sort of come in on this. Vicky, feel free to sort of butt in on this whenever you want. But I'll ask you and Ashley and Vicky. I'll ask you both this. Tell us about this apprenticeship program. Tell me about that program. I'm interested in it. So we're talking about the current program for postgraduates for the teacher apprenticeship. So what's the difference between that and like a PGCE or Teach First or any of these other routes?
So for Vicky, she has been full-time employed by school for 12 months. So she has been paid as an unqualified teacher. She has been in a classroom doing effectively placements, but they're full-time over an entire term. So across her 3 terms, she was in different key stages, different classrooms. She had me as a mentor all the way through. We had weekly mentor meetings. I had mentor training sessions and meetings with her university. She also had weekly tutorials. There were assignments. There were online modules to complete, and some sort of conference setups where they'd go away for a day or two and work together. So it was like doing uni and placements, but all together at the same time.
Vicky, I'll bring you in now. Can I ask you why you went for this route, this teacher apprenticeship route, rather than other routes?
So I think for me, with my degree, I then struggled to get into a school, even though I had the degree.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have the experience, it the degree didn't matter over the experience. So when I got a teacher assistant position in the school, it was just kind of my working up the ladder, and it got to a head where I had a meeting with the head teacher and just said, I want to be a teacher.
Yeah.
And when we looked at this route, there was so much on the job learning that was available through it. It just seemed the best route to take.
That's amazing.
And obviously to still be paid.
Well, I was going to say, I was going to ask you sort of, so can you tell me your timeline from sort of 18 to present then? So did you do a degree straight after school or not?
So 16 to 18, I went to college and did my childcare. Then the plan was to go to university.
Yeah.
It didn't happen.
Yeah.
I ended up having a daughter who was a bump in the road, amazing bump, but it was a bump.
Yeah.
So I started working in private day nurseries, and
so this is at 18. This is at 18, 19 sort of time.
Yeah, straight into private day nurseries from finishing college.
Yeah.
And then when I was 20, I started off through the Open University, and it took me 8 years to work my way up to be able to do the degree.
Degree in what?
Because I early childhood.
Wow.
And because I was still working, I had to do the part-time route with the Open University. They wouldn't accept that I would be able to manage my own time and do it full time.
Yeah.
Because to them, I had a full-time job, so it wasn't allowed.
Yeah. So I mean, you don't have to be sort of explicit about this, but in terms of the costs associated with the OU, presumably we're talking in the thousands to be able to do that over that time while you were working.
Yeah, I'm in thousands of pounds worth of debt with them.
Yeah. And this is my point, you see, like with that degree, which took you 9 years part-time at the Open University to do, has that helped you through the process you're in now, being a teacher apprentice?
No. It was irrelevant. There was nothing about the early years foundation stage. There was nothing about how to teach within an early years setting in a school. I don't think it was relevant to being a teacher.
So interesting. It really. So, do you sort of, if you were given that option, maybe, and I do sort of understand the point. There may be a difference between primary and secondary here. There might be, but like I was saying to Wayne earlier, that I mean, he's secondary maths, I'm secondary history, and we both sort of have that view that in terms of maybe, I mean, Wayne, I don't want to speak for you, but like you can unmute yourself and come in at this point, but I think the argument would be that primary is different to secondary when it comes to like that subject knowledge sort of thing and sort of the requirements around that. But Vicky, to be fair, what year group have you been teaching them this year through your teacher apprenticeship? Is it just one or more?
From January, year 5-6.
Year 5-6. So in terms of like, so have you felt secure and sort of, I mean, obviously you're just starting out, to be fair, and I don't think any teacher would feel like secure in the first few years subject knowledge wise, but you know, like you haven't felt at a disadvantage, let's put it that way, to people who've just done a BA and then gone in?
No. So over the past year when I've been doing my apprenticeship, there's a platform and there's a module for each subject that you can dip in and out of. So if, say, there was something in history that I'd be teaching and I was unsure, I could dip into the module, and I've still got access to that now that I've finished. And it can give you ways to teach, ways to bring in drama within the history. And there's just so much in them subject modules that I will have now for life to go back on and dip into whenever I feel like it.
Yeah. I mean, do you regret this apprenticeship route wasn't available to you earlier without the OU degree, without having to get the degree?
Yeah.
Yeah, because presumably you would have gone in, I don't know, 5 years ago or something, or even longer ago, potentially.
Yeah, especially because with the Open University, I couldn't go straight in with the degree, so I had to do it in stages.
Ashley, are you still there?
I am.
Hello. I want to ask you this. I mean, and obviously Vicky's here, but I wanted to ask you sort of, you've obviously mentored a lot of people. Vicky presumably has been mentored by you within the school. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I mean, you know, without sort of comparing Vicky to every other mentee that you've had, do you think, I mean, is Vicky the first one that you've had through the apprenticeship route?
Vicky's the first one to complete. I am mentoring another apprentice at the moment. She'll finish in July.
Yeah. So how, I mean, you know, how have you found that experience with Vicky? Have you noticed any differences between mentoring Vicky than mentoring other people who've gone through the conventional route?
I've mentored quite a few PGCE students. I also mentor ECTs. And one thing that I would say is that I think the apprentice route is really beneficial for somebody who already has a bit of life experience. I don't know that it would be the best route for someone coming straight out of college into. I do think having experience outside of education could still be beneficial to you in the apprentice route. But I think the type of course that Vicky's on, it has been really, really beneficial for her, knowing that actually she already had quite a lot of skills in working with children, working in classrooms and so on. So I've been really confident in leaving her with responsibility for planning, with working with the pupils. It has felt like she's had quite a good preparation, and because the mentoring is it's very intense. You know, there's quite a high level of expectation in terms of frequent observations, focusing on the things that Vicky wants to focus on. The weekly meetings where we talk about all of her module learning and things like that. So it is quite a heavily supported program. And I do think doing that on the job has been really beneficial in setting her up to have the confidence to just step into a classroom and take responsibility for that now. She's got a really good understanding of what she needs to do in terms of the bigger picture of being a teacher and not just the teaching bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Vicky, have you sort of looked at other teachers and compared yourself to them and thought, oh, I'm not as, I mean, have you felt any sort of imposter syndrome or any, you know, like, how have you found that side of it?
I think at the first a little bit, thinking that, oh, it's just me. I know there's times where I've asked Ashley about things and her response was, they're your class, you make the decision. Whereas I think it's really useful to be able to go and see all the other teachers. So in the time that I weren't teaching, I had access to a full school of teachers who've got experience in lots of different areas. So if I wanted to say, go and look at behaviour strategies,
yeah,
Ashley could point out who was the best person to go and watch.
Yeah.
And that was instant, like, learning on the job.
Yeah.
It was just there at the tip of my fingers.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, just to recap for anyone just joining us now, Vicky is a teacher apprentice. So she is being paid through this year as a sort of employee whilst becoming a qualified teacher. She does have a degree through the Open University. The proposal by the government would mean that Vicky would not need to do the Open University degree, but could enter this apprenticeship potentially earlier and without having to get that degree, which took her 9 years. So that's just the recap. And also just to say thank you to everybody who's with us listening. I know many other people have been through the course of the show, but thank you to those who are here now. This show, as all of our shows on Teachers Talk Radio, is brought to you in association with John Catt Educational, johncatbookshop.com for all your professional development needs. They're an excellent publisher. Check them out. You can get as many books as you could possibly want on teaching through John Catt. So have a look on that and do check it out. But Vicky, I mean, just sort of dwelling on the experience a minute, was it very did you feel frustrated over those 9 years? Sort of, did you feel as though you were being held back a little bit by having to do this degree?
At times, I think sometimes if I had an assignment and when I was doing it and I'm thinking, it's not beneficial to me. I'm not seeing the association with my role coming through this assignment.
Yeah.
Whereas in the apprenticeship, I did one of my assignments was how is early reading taught and assessed in my school, and then linking it into other schools because I had to do a placement at another school. And I felt that was really relevant to my role.
Yeah.
Because it's something that I needed to do in that early years role. Whereas some of the assignments with my open university were just, I can't even remember them.
Yeah. Well, I bet you can't. I mean,
because,
you probably did the first one 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, presumably were you doing that like evenings and weekends and stuff?
Yeah, evenings and weekends.
Yeah, it's such a commitment. It really is. Like, fair play to you. Because I know we've had 2 other guests on earlier who similar. You know, I think one was 6 years doing the Open University degree, another one maybe 3 or 4. So it's a real like, and obviously you've got the financial commitment as well. You mentioned like the debt as well off the back of doing because it is quite expensive. Like the OU degrees, like they're not cheap. Like, you know, so.
No.
I guess anybody who goes down that route at the moment, you know, yeah, it's a really tough like path, you know, to take. I mean, I guess like, would you have preferred to have done a conventional degree if you'd have been able to do it?
I think that's the path I would have took. Yeah.
Yeah. But obviously, you needed to carry on working through that time. Yeah. I mean, if anybody else, by the way, wants to sort of join in this conversation, then feel free to do so. You just have to click the little button on the bottom left, the little microphone icon. So if you have a view on teacher apprenticeships, good or bad, the idea that a degree is needed to be a teacher, or you just have a general view on the professional status of teachers, then definitely click that little button and we'll bring you on as a speaker. Ashley, do you sort of see... What do you think about this whole idea of the professional status of a degree?
I think a degree does have a professional status because, you know, there is usually a set of standards and things that go alongside that. But I have a little bit of a fear that professional status could be the death of our field. And a bit of that sort of comes from, I think, in a lot of schools around the UK, if you look around at the staff and you look around at the pupils, you get 2 very, very different diversity pictures.
Yeah.
And it's a real concern to me when I look at my class and I look at the teachers that they've had along their journey, who are all very like me. And it really makes me think, where is the representation? Where are those children getting the view that that teacher is someone like me? And university is a path that is not available to all. You know, we've talked a lot about the cost. It's not available to everybody. Being able to commit that amount of time without having an income, that's before you even consider what it actually costs to go to university, is prohibitive for so many people. And I really worry that the really heavy focus on teachers having to have a degree and that being the only possible professional qualification, it rules an awful lot of people out who would be brilliant teachers that just aren't in a position to be able to do a degree.
Yeah, and I think that was my sort of point earlier on around this. You know, my view is that I don't think a degree should necessarily have a higher professional status than 20 years of really good progress and experience within a job. I think the example I gave earlier, which was the best one I could come up with, is somebody who left school 18, became an entrepreneur, became very successful in the world of business and business management, managed people, managed the business, accelerated the growth of the business, sold the business, started another business, and so on and so forth. And then at the age of 45, decided, I want to become a teacher. And then apparently that person, because they haven't done a degree, doesn't have the same professional status as somebody who's been 18, left school, done a 3-year BA in business, and then went through a PGC and went in to become a business teacher. Like,
yeah, 100%.
I don't think that, like, don't get me wrong, I understand the way it looks now in terms of, right, degree, it's professional status. Yeah, I get it. But in terms of actual practical application, knowledge, skills, wisdom, all those things, personally, either I would see no difference or I would choose the person who's done it for 20 years.
And I think on top of that, there are many, many careers out there where you can go into those through apprenticeships or traineeships. You think before I even went to uni, I took 12 months off to work and save, and I was working with people. I was working in a printing firm, and we were attached to an engineering firm, and 3 of the guys at the engineering firm were on traineeships. So they were doing effectively like a college or an A-levels at the same time as on-the-job training. Now, those guys went on to be civil and structural engineers. They're in a profession, but I can't understand why the fact that they haven't done an actual degree would then prevent them from being able to pass on their knowledge years later.
Yeah. This is my point. I do agree with you. It does vary on subjects, doesn't it? Because like, for example, a historian becoming a history teacher, well, they would have had to have a degree, maybe even a PhD, to become a historian in the first place, right? But the examples that were given down some of the more vocational routes, I gave the example of a professional footballer, right, who then became a coach and a manager, maybe did their UEFA coaching badges, and then decided to become a PE teacher. And someone turned around and said, you've got to do a full BA in sports science before you can become a PE teacher. I don't agree with that, personally. I just think let them do it. Let them do the PGCE or whatever it is that, let them do the teacher apprenticeship, whatever route's available, because I just don't know whether, yes, I understand you get the certificate at the end. I get that. And that's the professional status, to show you've done it, to show you've had that commitment, you've done it. But in terms of the knowledge, I'm not convinced that will give you superior, any more knowledge than that person hadn't already gained. Anyway.
Absolutely. And I think so much of what we do, curriculum changes. There is no way that what you do at university can be, it's not an endpoint to your subject knowledge. So even if you do the most relevant degree possible, you do a maths degree, you become a maths teacher. You do an English degree, you become an English teacher. There is no way that degree is all encompassing for all of the things that you will encounter needing to teach in either primary or secondary. It's a constant element of being a teacher, is building on your subject knowledge, is learning new things and ensuring that you have the breadth of knowledge to teach your class effectively. It's always changing, and you can't trust that having done a degree early on is going to provide you with what you need.
Yeah, I'm going to bring Paul in now. Paul, I hope you finished drinking your Ribena out of your Teachers Talk Radio mug.
I did. Yeah, I did. Thank you very much.
Oh yeah.
I was just going to say that loads of, everything Ashley's said, I think I agree with, is the fact that I think I did my QTS sort of same sort of time that you did your degree, Tom. And even the things that I learned, 15 years ago, a lot of them now just aren't being taught at primary, or they're not relevant or anything else. So certainly it does change. I think whatever qualification it is that you get, because I don't think you can step into a teaching job having just been a professional. You've got to do something, even like you say, to have 20, 30 years of experience in a particular field, to then suddenly go into a classroom would just, I just don't think it works like that.
I'm not talking about, but they'd still have to do a PGCE.
Yeah, something.
I'm talking about I'm talking about a BA. I'm talking about a 3-year, 4-year subject degree. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, because I mean, I think you're right. I think you're right in that they've got to do something, because teaching more and more is so much more than the classroom. I mean, now we're literally on strike tomorrow because of workload and red tape and all sorts, as well as the actual pay. So the amount of things and different skills that you have to do at any level, particularly primary where I am, is just so vast. It's not literally talking to children. It's so much paperwork and doing assessments and reports and this, that, and the other.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. It's a whole sort of domain. I think the thing is, right, I think that age-wise is a bigger factor than degree. So if somebody is older and they've got more life experience, then I think that's a more powerful thing to have than being 21 and having done a 3-year degree.
Massively.
And literally coming out of that into teaching from there.
Yeah.
So, like, for example, if let's say we said, right, they introduced this apprenticeship option, and somebody had done a BA for 3 years, and then they did the 1-year paid apprenticeship option, whereas you had someone who had done 10 years of work and was 28, and then they did the 1-year apprenticeship option. Like, they've got more actual life experience, way more life experience than option A. So I don't know. I'm like a bit torn there, because I'm like, well, hang on. Yeah. What we're talking about, though, as well, is that sort of degree on a certificate thing. I've got a degree. It says it on a certificate. I just, for me, the world's changing. For me, you can get certificates now with online courses and everything else. The diversity of how you gain knowledge has grown so much that look at ChatGPT. I mean, you could probably do a degree just through that. You know what I mean? Just ask it. You could ask it the things that you'd ask the professor in a seminar, right? And it would probably give you the answers. I'm not by any means suggesting that ChatGPT should replace professors, but I'm just saying there is such a diversity now in how you can gain knowledge that didn't exist when we did our degrees in the early 2000s.
Yeah, there's no guarantee. There's absolutely no guarantee. I've seen teachers who have gone through like a QTS like I did and turn out being the worst teachers. And there we were given subject knowledge, and we were on the job probably more than any other teaching degree, to be honest. And then and they've been awful or good. And same with people who've done, had lots of life experience and then done the PGCE. They can be either as well. So there's no guarantee. There's no one right answer. That's for certain. And I think the way that you've got to look at it is now, because going to university is so expensive and everything else, there's got to be other ways to go in. But what you don't want to happen, and I think this is what maybe Sarah was talking about before, is that you can't lower the bar so much that any Tom, Dick, and Harry can just jump in and say, "Well, I'm a teacher." I knew
you were going to say Tom, Dick, and Harry. I knew that phrase was coming. It was just
nothing
so
to do with you, by the way. Nothing to do with you.
No, absolutely not. No, I just knew that phrase was coming. It was just, but yeah, like, you're absolutely. I agree with that. Obviously, you don't want to sort of go, hey, do you fancy being a teacher? Like, on the street, yeah, I'll be a teacher. And they walk into a classroom the following day, like, whoever they are. Like, no, we are heading in that direction, by the way.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? Because like I posted before, I think, like, I felt as though since I went for doing the degree, everything on TV or the media and things like that, our profession has been degraded. It seemed like every year. And we've sort of been beaten every year. And nowadays, when you sort of say to someone, "Oh, I'm a teacher," it doesn't hold the same respect as it used to, because they see so many people becoming a teacher in so many different ways. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes that can be detriment to the whole profession.
Hannah, you get the final say on this show. What a privileged position to be in.
Oh, thank you. Well, I was just going to say that, like, I've got a friend who is into drama, and he's a director, and he works in acting schools, but doesn't have a degree. So he can't go in and be a drama teacher in schools, but he's got all this experience at universities and with drama courses outside of school, but he can't actually go in and be a drama teacher in school.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I mean. There's probably 100 examples like that. You know, I've tried to give a few today of people who are sort of locked out of the profession, who would genuinely be able to just literally walk in and do the job really well and might want to, but literally for financial reasons or you know, that block of needing that piece of paper that says degree on it, they're locked out. And I think there's a lot of people out there like that. I genuinely think there are. I don't think it's like going to solve the problems that the government thinks that it is. I think the government see it as this golden ticket to solve the teacher retention crisis, which is absolute rubbish. It's not. But I do think there are people out there who are potentially locked out, who can't get in.
I think as well that if you're going to do it, that there is like a gap. Like, I think a lot of people will go into teaching and be like, that wasn't what I expected to be like that. I didn't actually enjoy that. So I think if you could put some kind of caveat in there that if they wanted to join the apprenticeship with no degree or kind of experience with children, that they should be an LSA for like the first 6 months and experience that. And it will kind of fill the gap for LSAs that we're kind of having that gap and that budget kind of gap, that they have that experience of being in a classroom before they kind of get passed off to then be in front of a class and do that. So they get the experience of what that teaching experience is like to see whether it is for them before they kind of get the okay to be, okay, you can do this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure Vicky, I don't know if you heard Vicky talking, Hannah, before you came on, but Vicky is an apprentice at the minute. So she's actually a paid, going for a paid apprenticeship, teacher apprenticeship. She's obviously got a degree. It took her 9 years to get that through the Open University. So I think she was a TA. Vicky, is that right? I think you were a TA for a long time.
Yeah, I was a TA for 3-4 years at the school before I then took on the apprenticeship, and I think I agree. It was such a valuable role, and to see what the teachers were going through and what they had to do, and it just made me want to do it even more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to ask you, Vicky, like, did you have the chance to sort of stand in front of the class, presumably you must have during that time as a TA, to sort of get a taste of, okay, this is what it might be like?
Yeah, so there was a time where we went up to 38 nursery with one teacher and 2 TAs. So throughout my whole experience in nursery, I was basically a second teacher on a TA wage.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, there's a lot of cases like that, aren't there, where TAs are sort of de facto teachers, or at least sort of part of the time and doing a lot of that, and they can't become a teacher, you know. So, yeah, anyway, we've covered a huge amount of ground. I want to thank every contributor tonight. It's been a really good chat. This is going to be available as a podcast through Teachers Talk Radio, probably either tonight or tomorrow morning. So if you're listening back to this as a podcast, thank you for sort of sticking with us, and I hope you've enjoyed the chat as much as I have. Teachers Talk Radio is going to be back tomorrow evening. We've got 2 shows tomorrow evening available through the TTR website, both live as always at 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. 6 p.m. with Ben Thomas, and then 9 p.m. with Natalie. Really interesting shows coming up tomorrow, so do check those out through the Listen Live button on the website tomorrow evening. As I say, keep following us, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Leave us a review if you want to be really nice. Then, you know, give us a nice review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast from. And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Nathan, for adminning as always. And We'll be back tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your evening. And thank you, special thanks, Ashley, Vicky, for coming on as guests, Hannah and Paul for calling in also. And we'll see you again very soon. Cheers all.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.